Cool. Right, let's get started in that case. The plan is to chat about disability grants and community. So if you've got a disabled child, everything that has a disability or special need in the label has an extra cost. And it's not fair, it's not right, it's really annoying. But because the demand is there and because we need it for our children, they do charge us extra. There's lots and lots of funding available, and pretty much there's funding for all circumstances, but the information and eligibility can be difficult to understand. It's often long, it's difficult to find, and you're kind of trying to work out where can I go for what. Actually, if you're trying to juggle caring for a child, work, trying to go to hospital appointments, education appointments, therapies, there's a lot to it, and anything that you can do to make your life easier, that to me, that's always a win. I'm always one for an easy life. So essentially, there's lots of funding available, but it's just a matter of being able to find it. Ooh. Oh no, it's giving me a little notification saying that someone's talking. This background noise. Okay, so what is a grant? A grant is essentially any kind of financial contribution towards equipment. It might be that a funder was to give you cash to buy the equipment. It might be that they buy the equipment for you. It could be that you're given a card or gift vouchers for a specific supplier. The key things about grants is that they do not need to be repaid, providing you adhere to all the terms and conditions. And there's a lot of terms and conditions, but the main one comes down to spend it on what you said what you've asked for, and then make sure that you keep all the receipts for it for at least 7 years, and then make sure that if there is any changes or anything like that, that you stay in contact with the funder. With grants, they're not taxable, and some grants can be really, really small, and that wouldn't be as relevant. But actually, if you're talking about some of the larger grants, so some grants are even gone into tens of thousands, it's important that you know that they're not taxable and that you don't need to declare them in that way. With grants, it always has to be used on what you applied for. That's really, really important. Okay, and usually they come from either a statutory body, so from the NHS, from the local governments, or they're from a charity. So where does this magical money come from? So it can be from charities, and normally it is from charities, if I'm honest, especially as things are getting harder and statutory guide kind of thresholds are increasing. It is normally from charities at the moment. There might be trusts. There's also local and national government schemes. It might be that it's via somebody such as your social worker. It could be through companies and community groups. It could be through clubs. So things like the Rotary Club. A lot of employers will have funds for their employees. It's just a matter of kind of having a look, having a nosy and seeing what there is that's available to your family. Every application, every funder will have its own criteria, okay? So organisations are looking for people who are genuinely in need, so only ask for things that you cannot get yourself. I say that with kind of caveats. So don't go without things that your child needs just because you think there's other people that are more worthy than you. If you're thinking that your child can go without something because there's somebody else that's more worthy than you, as a general rule of thumb, you are the guys that the charities want to be funding, okay? Most funders are going to want to know why you cannot get it yourself, or why the NHS or local authority will not get it for you, especially in the case of things like wheelchairs and medical equipment. And often it's because there's guidelines and thresholds, and it could just be, so wheelchair services in some areas will only fund up to £1,000. Well, most wheelchairs cost more than that, and it could be just that you kind of fall between a crack, and actually you just need that bit of help to get something. It might be that the item that you can get from the local authority isn't the best one for your child, and so the funders just want to be able to understand the position, really. Many funders will want the family to fund at least part of the item, and they will be asking questions about your family income. It and that can be very intrusive. It can be intrusive, and it can be annoying, and you can be thinking, well, actually, what right do they have to know that? It's so that they can make sure that the money is going to the place to families that need it. But normally, most people do actually qualify, and as soon as they start asking about your finances, your kind of go-to thought is, I work, therefore I don't qualify. Actually, that's not the case. It's many of the income thresholds are a lot higher than what you think, and if they're not high enough on some of them, it's worth looking around and talking to someone to help you to make sure that you can find the funder that is right for you. Okay, so what about statutory agencies? So historically, grants were only available for items that were not statutory provisions. So things like going on holiday, trikes for special needs trikes. But as thresholds have got higher, then charities and funders have had to step in to be able to kind of bridge that gap. So whereas before you might be able to get you might be able to get the wheelchair that your child needs, it's becoming more and more common that actually the local authorities aren't able to provide either the whole cost or some of the added extras that your child might need. This is why it may not be possible to get what you need as well, and it might be that they can only part fund it, and it's why they have tight criteria. Please don't be put off by the criteria. Speak to someone and get advice, because it might be that one funder can't fund something, but actually another can. It's also why funders will ask lots and lots of questions about your request as well, because they want to make sure that they're funding something that you genuinely need, and it's not something that the NHS or local authority should be providing for you. Okay, so how to find these magical grants? The main thing that I would say is get help. Obviously, I'm biased. I would say talk to Little Miracles. But other places that you can go to help includes like the Citizens Advice Bureau, the library, the council, your social worker. There's a disability grants website that's really good. You've got Turn to Us, which is fab. Other charities. The more experience that the person who has applied for these grants, the more chance of you getting one, essentially. There will be people involved in your child's care that apply for these grants every day for families. It just really is a matter of talking to them and just kind of getting help. Always get help. Some of the forms are quite long, some are quite depressing, some ask you to kind of think about the negatives, and they can be really, really hard to do yourself and kind of hard on your mental health. So I would always say get help and get someone to fill it in for you. Okay, so in terms of what you can apply for, really the question is, what does your child need? So different organisations will have different priorities and criteria. There's some funders that will only fund holidays, some that will only fund wheelchairs, some that will only fund medical equipment or sensory equipment. Some will be very specific to, we will only fund a child with a bone condition, we'll only fund ones with autism. The main thing is finding the right funder for you. And when we do find the right funder for you, that making sure that you can explain the difference that item is going to make to your child, and being able to demonstrate why it will make a difference and that you know it's going to make a difference, especially if it's quite an expensive item. So it might be great if you kind of apply to say, yep, my child needs a bike. However, if you have a bike that's completely unsuitable and is going to sit in the shed for the next 5 years, well, that's just a waste of everybody's time and money. So you'd have more chance of getting it if you can explain, my child would like a bike. As a family, we would like to be able to go out and cycle. But also, my child has tested this bike. This is their reaction to it. They really enjoyed it, and this is why this is the best bike for me and my child. Okay, so who can apply? Some funders are really happy for parents to apply. Some will require qualified professionals, someone who, and that professional differs from form to form. So some of the forms and some funders will insist that it's a family support worker who has gone through their training. Someone insists that it's somebody that's involved in their medical care, and it really, really varies from funder to funder. You're always going to have a higher success rate with somebody who completes the forms regularly. So I would say always get support from a family support worker who specialises in grant applications, because from a point of view of, if the more they do, they will have experience with which funders are likely to be more sympathetic to you and your child, and which ones are more likely to support the application. Even if they need to come from an NHS worker or from your physio, if you get the support worker to complete the form and then the physio just to sign off on it, that is usually the best way. Some NHS workers are also very overworked and actually don't have time to sit down and complete the applications, and getting appointments with them in the first place can be quite difficult. Many funders will also need a medical report to say if the item is suitable or not, especially in the case of medical equipment and wheelchairs. And they'll also want to confirm that it's not available from statutory services. So in the case of things like wheelchairs, it could be that the child's been measured up and that we know this is the exact size that they need. It could be that you have, if you're applying for a bicycle, that they want someone to say, yep, that bicycle is going to be suitable for that child and not going to make their medical condition worse. And so it's really important to kind of read the guidelines and know what that funder's asking for. The guidelines are really, really long. If you have a support worker that is completing the forms for you, they should read those and go through them all with you. So how to apply. So every funder will have a different process, and sometimes the processes are quite quick and quite short application forms. It might be a quite short application form on a website, but it's very unlikely that you'll avoid having to complete a written application. It's also unlikely that you'll get away with just a short one. There are often follow-up questions, and they will be asking questions. So, can I apply to more than one organisation? Honestly, it depends on what you're applying for and what organisation you're going to. So some organisations will only let you apply to them once. Some organisations will put in their small print that you can't apply to them if you're also applying to other charities. But some charities will also have in their guidelines that you cannot apply to them if you've applied to any other organisation for anything. So where that becomes more relevant is if you're looking at wish granting organisations. So if you want to go, if your child has a wish, well, actually, it's better to apply for the wish from someone like Make-A-Wish, where they say you cannot go to any other organisation, than to apply for your wheelchair from Make-A-Wish, because you've then used your wish up on a wheelchair when you could have gone to React or New Life for your wheelchair. So it's really important to choose your funder wisely. And if you are applying to more than one organisation, let the funders know. They would much rather that you are honest than you tell them, yep, we're applying to multiple people, we haven't heard yet. Because funders talk. They all talk. They will also, it might be that they can make a joint funding award, and especially where there's a parental contribution element. So often the parental contribution is up around 20%. It can be that the funders will come together and joint fund the equipment if a contribution from the parent isn't possible. It's really all about speaking to the funders, keeping the communication open, and an experienced support worker who applies for these fundings will know what you can and can't do and what each funder will allow. Okay, so can I get the money twice? You'd be surprised at how many people think that, yep, I've been awarded the grant from this person, and then they get a letter through saying, oh, we will also award you a grant. Do not accept the money twice. This is fraud. Please do not get arrested for fraud. If you come back to me in that situation, I'm going to be honest, my sympathy levels are going to be low. If you are offered an item twice, then that's amazing. If you've already accepted it, great. just talk to the second funder. It might be that they would change the award to something else that would benefit your child, or it might be that that two organisations will joint fund the item. But it's really, really important that you don't claim the money twice for the same item, because that is fraud. Someone will get arrested, and I haven't got time to be bailing you out, if I'm honest. Okay, so on the application, what information are they going to need? So they're going to need full details of your child, full details around anyone who's got parental responsibility, including the financial details. And some funders are stricter on that than others. So if a child lives with just one parent, it might be that they're quite happy to just have the financial details of that one parent. Some organisations, however, might be asking financial details of the second parent, even if they're not contributing towards the child's upbringing. They're going to want to know detailed information about your child's disability, and they're also going to be asking for proof as well. They're going to be wanting to know what you're applying for, why they need it, and it's really, really important that you get the details in there around the difference that it's going to make for your child. It sounds silly, but you'd be surprised at how many people apply for equipment grants and they don't explain the difference or why, and that makes so much difference. It makes it so much easier for you to be funded if you can tell the funder, I need this exact model, this is why I need it, this is why we can't get anywhere else, why we can't get the funding anywhere else, and this is the difference that it's going to make to my child, this is the freedom that it's going to give them. Another thing that's really important is to know how much money you're actually asking for. So speak to the provider who's provided the item and get quotes, and make sure the quote includes everything your child needs. So if you're looking for a trike, a special needs trike, for example, well, the cost on the website might be around £650, and you're there thinking, okay, that's great, I'm going to apply for £650. But actually, if you speak to the provider and get a full quote, you'll know exactly what you need and exactly how much it's going to cost you. And it will be that they'll add on things like, if you need lateral supports, that's going to cost. And things like that really, really add up. So my little boy's trike, it's £650 for a basic trike, but it was over £1,300 when you start adding on all the different supports and the kind of straps and the things that he needs. And his medical needs are quite low now. If you're going to, the more add-ons you need, the more it's going to add up. So make sure that the quote takes into account everything that you need. You're also often going to need evidence from a professional to say that the item that you're requesting is safe and needed. So especially with things like wheelchairs, if you've not got anybody in your team that's going to say this child needs a wheelchair, there's no point really applying. There's got to be a medical need if it's for medical equipment, and most funders will want to know that it's going to be safe. From a point of view of, they want to make sure that they're spending the money wisely, and also from a point of view of, they want to make sure they're not going to get sued for supplying a piece of equipment that's the wrong equipment for a child. So why do charities and organisations ask so many questions? So there's lots of reasons. So it's a hard time for charities. It's really, really hard to fundraise as a charity at the moment, and there's also a lot more guidance around fundraising. So we are questioned on where we're giving our money to, how we're spending every single penny, and that means that they have to ask more questions as well. Charities do not ask these questions to make your life harder. It's so that they can support those that are most in need and make their money and funding stretch as far as possible. It's also worth knowing that many organisations only meet 1 or 2 times a year. So when your application reaches them, they have to then come back to you and ask more questions. Well, if they don't meet for another year, you're then looking at another year before they can make a decision on your application. And that's another thing that I've kind of missed out before. It's really important to know that charitable applications are not quick. They're not going to be a quick turnaround. Often they are long, they're drawn out. There are, in some circumstances, where you can get emergency applications, and also you can get equipment loans as well in an emergency. But it's never going to be a quick win, okay? It is going to be quite long and drawn out. Okay, so hopefully I can get the buttons up and I can unmute you. The funny beeping, I am pretty sure is my neighbours. Right, hopefully I've unmuted people. I've unmuted some people. Has anyone got any questions? My plan is that because I've done the whole presentation as one, that we should be able to cut off the whole of the question side so that it is completely confidential.